Hello, everyone, to everyone who's already joined the webinar. Thank you so much for coming here. To give you an introduction, I'm Nihar. I'm a fourth-year student at Ashoka University, and I'll be your moderator for this afternoon. Let me just share my screen. Yeah, so before we begin, I'll give a small introduction about what Project Protein under the Live Green and sponsored by the Good Food Institute is all about. So, the Good Food Institute is a think tank in the alternative protein space, and under it is an initiative called the Alternative Protein Project. I hope the screen is visible to everyone. Yeah, okay, great. So, the Alternative Protein Project is an initiative by the Good Food Institute, which finds, trains, and empowers student leaders at key universities to build academic ecosystems needed for the upliftment of the all protein industry. Some of the key focuses of these groups are things like awareness about the auto industry, building a community, education, research, and innovation, which are the three main goals for our Project Protein as well. Just to give everyone a glimpse of how big the all protein community really is at the university level, there are 47 active groups in about 17 different countries, full of different universities. Some of the top universities in the world have their own alternative protein projects. As you can see, Stanford has their own project, Duke as well, John Hopkins, Tufts, University of Melbourne. Truly, the alternative protein project at a student level is a global phenomenon. So today, we have a policy talk scheduled for Ashoka University students, exposing them to the policy changes that have happened in India, supporting the alternative protein industry. We're very, very honored and thankful to have Astha Gaur, the Senior Policy and Regulatory Specialist from GFI India. And we're very excited to hear from her about how the Indian government is shaping a policy in regards to alternative proteins in India, and how this might be in comparison to the rest of the world as well. Astha, I'll just stop sharing now and let you take it over from here.
Thank you, Nihar. I'll just start by sharing my screen.
Yeah.
Hey, I hope that is visible to everyone.
Yeah, it is.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for joining this session, taking the time to hear a little bit more about smart proteins, as we like to call them in India, or alternative proteins, as they are known globally. Thank you, Nihar. Thank you, Rohit, and the Office of Sustainability at Ashoka University for inviting me for this webinar. I lead, as Nihar already kindly mentioned, I lead our engagement on the regulatory agendas at GFI India, particularly our work with the apex food regulatory body in India, which is the FSSAI, and other ministries as required. For the next 30 minutes or so, I will try to cover the basics of alternative proteins and the policy development in India and globally as well around them. But first, Nihar already touched upon what GFI does briefly, as well as what SPP is all about. Just to touch upon GFI and our global affiliates as well, we are a part of a network of not-for-profit organizations in 7 key regions. And as an organization, we work with scientists, entrepreneurs, investors, and stakeholders, diversifying protein sources for a more secure, sustainable, and just food system. We primarily function across 4 broad pillars, which is science and technology, corporate engagement, innovation, and policy. Before we dive right into alternative protein and smart protein, let us just take a minute to think about what is the biggest challenge that we face in our times that would also hugely affect the future of the human civilization and our life on Earth. And that challenge is, how will we feed 10 billion people by 2050 sustainably, efficiently, and safely? Data has clearly shown that meat production is up by 70% from 1995 to 2021, and it will continue to skyrocket through 2050. The inefficiency of industrial animal protein production contributes to food insecurity by competing for limited land and agricultural inputs. And the current animal agricultural system also contributes to climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. So then what is the solution, right? At GFI India, we have a theory of change that talks about smart protein being a solution to all the challenges that we discussed. Um, and the global challenge, particularly in the global south, today is feeding a growing population nutritiously, securely, and sustainably. And smart protein is a rapidly growing area of food technology, which focuses on pioneering foods which can provide a sustainable alternative to animal derived meat, eggs, dairy, and seafood. These innovative foods are designed to taste the same or better than conventional animal products, but have virtually none of the risks that are associated with conventional animal protein production and consumption. Um, Smart protein, as per GFI's definition, comprises of three pillars of sorts. Plant-based meat, eggs, seafood, and dairy utilize, as the name suggests, plant ingredients as building blocks to replicate the taste and nutritional profile of conventional animal products. Cultivated meat essentially is just meat, but that is made in large bioreactors utilizing cells that are obtained through a biopsy of an animal whose meat we want to produce, right? So these biopsied cells are then grown in a fluid called culture media that provides it the necessary nutrients. And we get meat which is free from antibiotics and promises to be far more sustainable when produced using renewable energy. To make both plant-based and cultivated meat, we require these certain highly efficient inputs that are produced using fermentation technology, biomass fermentation, and precision fermentation. And we'll just discuss that in a little while. But um, these technologies, they produce inputs or ingredients which increase functionality, improve the taste and nutritional value, and provide other host of benefits, including on sustainability. Therefore, fermentation as an input is the third technology, as the third pillar for the smart protein, as GFI has identified. And while I've been speaking of these three modalities separately, the prediction is in the future, we expect to see hybrid products like a plant-based chicken that incorporates cultivated fat, or a cultivated fish fillet that incorporates omega-3 fatty acids from algae. So we should not be thinking of these technologies, even from a policy perspective, in isolation. In Singapore, as an example, in Singapore, there's a cultivated meat product on the shelves that has 3% cultivated cells, and everything else is plant-based input and plant-based ingredient. Another example is the very famous Impossible Burger, which is mostly plant-based, but also uses fermentation to produce heme, which gives it that distinctive red color. Um, and we have discussed the technology, we have discussed the challenge. And while these technologies exist, and our theory of change says that these technologies provide a viable solution to the challenge we discussed, a pertinent question is, why must we in India spend time, money, and capacity and divert those towards smart protein, right? So the recent BioE3 policy, I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but we will talk about it in today's webinar. That was notified, I think, in August 2024. It talks about, or rather, it highlights smart protein as one of the 6 thematic areas coupled with functional foods. So it is clear that the Indian government and policy stakeholders, particularly the Department of Biotechnology, Ministry of Science and Technology, have identified smart protein as a solution to challenges such as climate change that India faces, while also recognizing the economic opportunity smart protein presents. We'll just discuss that. Um, in the last decade, there has been a widespread recognition of the implications of industrialized food systems in the Western countries by scientists, consumers, and policymakers. We have spoken about it enough, we read about it enough, right? Global food production is responsible for 35% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Out of that, 60% is contribution by animals as a source of food, as well as livestock emissions as well. So that's a huge chunk of the greenhouse gas emissions. Agriculture in India accounts for 15% of total India's emissions, and two-thirds of it comes from livestock farming. Industrial animal agriculture has also led to a prevalence of zoonotic diseases, and we are not very far away from the pandemic. We were in the middle of, um, as well as antibiotic resistance. As such, there has been a global acknowledgement for the need of alternatives. Bypassing the animal and processing more plants directly into food for human consumption is the only way we will provide protein to a fast growing and still vulnerable global population. Several reports, such as the UNEP's What's Cooking report, also advocates for a planetary healthy diet that focuses on alternative protein or smart protein, as we like to call them in India, and reduces our reliance on animal sourced foods. Here's a glimpse of how widespread the problem of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, is in India. And AMR's emergence and spread is accelerated by human activity. We know that mainly the misuse and overuse of antimicrobials to treat, prevent, and control infections in humans and animals. And as we know that currently in India, the only animal agriculture which has been industrialized to that scale, to whatever extent, is poultry. And there seems to be more infrastructure coming up for it. Interestingly, you will observe that the most increase in demand is going to be in the poultry sector. I think 10 billion people represents a population increase of 60% between 2005 and 2050, but demand for meat will rise even faster than that. So ultimately, now that we know what the challenges are, particularly in India, the question is, how does smart protein fit to solve for these challenges while also fitting into the national priorities that have been identified in the budgets by the union government as well? And we will see over here that there are several opportunities that smart protein presents that ties in directly to the national priorities, particularly for farmer welfare, as well as on the climate and nutrition front, also to generate huge job opportunities, export opportunities, and therefore economic opportunities as well. We will just dissect all of these as we move forward. When we talk about the opportunity on the plant-based input side of things, the global plant-based alternative industry is taking off as we speak. However, there's a requirement for better inputs, which are also sustainable. India, with its agricultural potential and the host of indigenous crops such as millets and pulses, which are climate resilient as well, uh, as well as the infrastructure that India has for processing these crops, and there's more to discuss on that, that provides India with an excellent opportunity to feed into the global supply chain for plant-based alternatives, right? In August this year, in fact, India released 109 high-yielding resilient crop varieties for climate-vulnerable farmers. Many of these climate-positive crops, such as pulses, legumes, beans, have applications for plant-based protein as well. And you can see what the applications are on the slide as well. Beyond climate resilience, government support for research on crop breeds with higher protein content and reduced off flavors can also be hugely impactful in increasing the commercial potential of these crops through plant protein value chains, which is a huge opportunity for India. Talking about fermentation, particularly biomass fermentation, there's a fermentation and biomanufacturing coupled with additional research and development also provides a very unique opportunity in creating a climate resilient protein production process. India has the potential to utilize the agri-side streams from rice, etc., to produce these biomass fermentation protein, which are highly nutritious, cost-effective as well. And talking about the opportunity on the precision fermentation and cultivated meat side, uh, we know that the pharmaceutical industry in India is approximately $50 billion, fulfilling a significant portion of the global demand for medicines and vaccines. And I think this was highlighted particularly during the pandemic when India was one of the big suppliers of vaccines globally to several other geographies as well. Today, we have a similar opportunity that awaits in the smart protein sector. India's robust pharmaceutical and bioprocessing industries have already laid a strong foundation, establishing us as a key player in the R&D, innovation, and the large-scale manufacturing capabilities that are needed for smart protein sector globally. Leveraging its biomanufacturing capabilities, India can innovate and scale up production of crucial equipment and ingredients cost competitively, leading the way for technological breakthrough to produce high quality and low cost food manufacturing while fostering robust bioeconomy growth. And particularly for culture media, these precision fermented inputs are extremely relevant and provide a host of benefits. And India has a huge potential to tap into that opportunity with existing infrastructure. And there are discussions about that we have been having at GFI India about retrofitting existing infrastructure to actually benefit that. We have spoken about what the opportunity for India is, but the question is, have we already been able to identify and tap into that opportunity? Has the Indian state policy framework identified that and has put relevant support that the industry, this very nascent industry, requires to take off from the ground? I think it goes without saying that the most crucial support for the sector will come from the government ministries and department. Through the course of our work in recent years, government ministries and departments have recognized the growth potential of this sector. It is encouraging to see all the relevant developments have taken place. BioE3, I think, is one of the most recent and biggest wins that have happened. DBT and scientific institutes under DBT have come together to form an expert committee on smart protein, where GFI India was also a member, which led to the launch of BioE3 policy. And as you can see, it's a policy that aims to support biotechnological solutions for the economy, environment, and employment, and where smart protein have a key role to play. In furtherance of this policy, the DBT and BIRAC also launched a call to set up biofoundries, which is a type of a biomanufacturing facility, automated biomanufacturing facility. And we are hopeful that efforts like these would increase the scope for infrastructure development, which is very crucial for the smart protein sector and the stage the industry is at right now. The Department of Science and Technology, or DST, has also been allocating grants for initiatives around developing alternative protein products from indigenous crops such as millets, which is to foster research on how we can utilize Indian resources to improve smart protein offerings across taste, texture, nutrition, and quality of the protein. Beyond national effort, even state governments like Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu have recently highlighted smart protein as part of their strategies to build biotechnology-focused manufacturing capabilities in state as well. And state-level work is extremely crucial. Also has been identified in the BioE3 policy, particularly the implementation aspect of it. And lastly, The apex food regulator, FSSAI, has also been discussing setting regulatory pathways for cultivated meat, which is hugely promising because the product is already approved in geographies such as Singapore, US, Israel, and might be approved very soon in other geographies such as Europe, UK, Switzerland, which has a different regulator than Europe, by the way, as well as Australia. To talk about Bio-E3 policy, because I believe that the Bio-E3 policy has the potential to be one of the biggest policy wins for India. And the policy is designed to strengthen the country's net zero goal of 2070 and its lifestyle for environment strategy, which encourages green behaviors and speeds up green growth by promoting a circular bioeconomy. I think I already gave a brief background of how the policy came about in July 2023, when the Prime Minister's Science and Technology Advisory Council met to identify key scientific important areas for high performance biomanufacturing. The Secretary of the Department of Biotechnology, Dr. Rajesh Gokhale, presented smart proteins as one of the initiatives. Since then, an expert committee was set that held closed-door meetings, and ultimately that resulted in the Bio-E3 policy with efforts from Department of Biotechnology and BIRAC as well. The goal of the policy is to fast-track innovation to technology in a sustainable manner, and it places a lot of emphasis on sustainability aspect, which is excellent. It also provides a framework to empower Indian institutions, universities, startups, and industries to engage in transformative innovations by intensifying research and innovation, boosting domestic biomanufacturing capability, about which we have just spoken about, particularly for biomass fermentation as well as precision fermentation, that ultimately leads to cultivated meat input. It also talks about doing that through accelerating transition to biomanufacturing and setting up facilities for scaling up and pre-commercial manufacturing as well. And of course, nurturing a cohort of highly skilled workforce, which is going to be hugely impactful for India. The policy has identified, and this is a screenshot from the policy itself, the policy has identified smart protein as a thematic area, and it has laid down different mechanisms that it could rely upon for the growth of the identified sectors. This includes establishing biofoundries and manufacturing hubs, developing a talent force, and building regulatory pathways for these novel products, such as cultivated meat. The policy also discusses bridging the gaps for scale-up between lab and market through effective industry-academia collaborations. So there are kind of two aspects to it. The bio-AI hubs will enable discovery research across the sectors, while the biofoundries and the manufacturing hubs will support facilities for pilot scale and pre-commercial scale research. So both the aspects of research and iteration as well as manufacturing are sort of addressed in the policy itself. And the implementation of this policy initiative will be through a public-private co-creation model that combines expertise across the value chain, which is academia, startups, and industry, through interministerial coordination. And this policy puts huge emphasis on interministerial coordination, not just domestically, but also internationally as well, which is also a very good strategy to achieve what it seeks to achieve. Biomanufacturing hubs will engage private sector partners to ensure sustainability in investments and for leveraging private sector operating capabilities. This will enable growth of an economically and environmentally sustainable bioeconomy and contribute for making Bharat self-reliant. And this has been highlighted in the policy. We've been speaking about the policy in general, but let's talk about how it would affect smart protein in India. According to us, the biomanufacturing policy will act as a catalyst for alternative protein or smart protein growth in key foundational areas. By providing a dedicated R&D and innovation support, the policy will accelerate the development of new technologies such as cultivated meat and fermentation, and processes that can pave the way towards nutrition, price, and taste parity of smart protein, thereby making them truly competitive alternatives to their animal-derived counterparts. And these are the challenges right now on the R&D front as well, on which the industry and the scientists and food technologists are trying to scale. So the policy will immediately address that. Meanwhile, the establishment of manufacturing hubs and biofoundries will offer crucial support for large-scale commercialization, which is also important because if we are not scaling, we won't be able to get to the market at a price that is sustainable. So this increased production capacity can significantly improve accessibility, affordability of smart protein and enabling them to reach a wider consumer base. Smart protein startups will also gain significant momentum through dedicated R&D and innovation support, greater investments, and a very nurturing ecosystem of sorts. And the policy will foster a collaborative environment, facilitating the exchange of knowledge and resources between industry, academia, and encouraging public-private partnerships as well. And PPP models, we know, are going to be hugely impactful. This will lead to faster development and commercialization of smart protein technologies, especially with biohubs and biofoundries coming in as well. And we discussed about how they cater to both aspects, the research as well as the manufacturing, both of which need to go hand in hand for the growth of the sector in India. Talking about on the plant-based side a little bit, I think with growing demand for millet, chickpeas, and other indigenous crop for smart protein end products, farmers and crop producing communities can also explore new avenues with these resource efficient crops to create a very robust supply chain and contribute also to the rural economic development, which again ties in with the national priorities excellently. The policy's commitment to expanding the skilled workforce is another vital aspect, as it aligns perfectly with sector's rapid growth. The priorities that were also highlighted in the budget this time around, by the way, and this will open several doors for students and nascent workforce who would be able to enter a fast-growing industry through a very dedicated coursework and in multidisciplinary roles as well. So BioE3 is expected to generate substantial employment opportunities, particularly in tier 2 and tier 3 cities where biomanufacturing hubs would be co-located. So that and that would also lead to leveraging local biomass produced, for example, through sugarcane and rice, and thereby enhancing economic development in those particular regions as well. So it kind of just ticks all the boxes. There's employment generation, there's utilization of agri-side streams, there's farmer welfare and benefit, there's affordable protein source that is available as well. And at the end of the day, we have to be very mindful of how it contributes to the revenue generation and the economy, and it does that as well. So looking at things in the longer term, all these efforts will combine to bring benefits to the consumers, because ultimately these are food products for the consumers, and they will gain access to a wider array of better quality, tastier, and more nutritious smart protein products, which will also lead to the growth of this sector in India. I hope that was kind of clear. While India has been doing this, and BioE3 policy is very recent, as we discussed, globally a lot has been happening on public investment side of things as well as the policy support and the regulatory clearances and approvals that have happened. So we'll just very quickly go through that as well. And I would also urge all the participants to read GFI's State of Global Policy report, which is published every year, which kind of summarizes all the global developments that are happening. Some of these figures are not completely updated, but if you go through that, I think you will get a very good idea of where different geographies are. So this slide essentially is to just give a glimpse of what some of the largest investments to date have been up to 2023. And this demonstrates uh, steep attention from the government towards smart protein, which makes sense because it's growing and it's becoming apparent to policymakers across the world about how smart protein can bring huge economic benefits. And it's not just that, but also it ties in very well with their climate and other sustainable development goals. And here I would like to point out that smart protein are a solution to 9 SDGs. Talking about a couple of different geographies as well, and through the next few slides, we'll see some examples of how government action in several ways um, has impacted smart protein, for instance, including it in agricultural strategic plans like China has done, or in the US with President Biden signing an executive order on biomanufacturing with an explicit mention of smart protein, to funding infrastructural development projects like in Qatar, or including it within climate strategy in Israel. All of these developments are something that shows that globally countries have recognized that smart protein will lead to economic growth for their geographies, at the same time will help them feed their growing population sustainably without putting a lot of stress on the land and other resources as well. This just kind of provides a glimpse all that has been happening. I'll just particularly talk about Canada because, particularly on the plant-based side of things, I think in the first tranche of funding from 2018 to 2023, Protein Industries Canada (PIC), which is an industrial cluster, protein cluster sort of initiative by Canada. It co-invested $173 million into 55 projects. And the initial investment leveraged some $304 million in private investment. It created 303 IP assets, and it helped companies leverage a further $234 million in follow-on investment, and is expected to contribute to $15 billion in GDP and create 10,800 direct and indirect jobs by 2031, which, as per PIC, Protein Industries Canada, and the Government of Canada, meets and surpasses every target which was set out by the program. So I feel there's a huge potential for India to learn from these examples, and I'll let you kind of quickly read everything else that is there on the slide as well. Even on the GST front, by the way, another aspect that we struggle with in not just India, but globally as well, is that there are no HSN code or harmonized set of system of nomenclature codes for smart protein products, which means ultimately that the duties that these products attract are really high, on the higher side, when compared with the conventional meat products. And May 2022, the government of Brazil created a new category for plant-based milks with a taxation rate of 0. So this is another thing that GFI has been working on as well. There are a couple of other examples, two very promising examples that we can learn from. For example, just in 2023, the Netherlands, and the Netherlands has been, as an ecosystem, it's very good ecosystem for smart protein products, particularly cultivated meat, by the way, as well as inputs for cultivated meat, such as precision fermentation. And in 2023, the Netherlands awarded 1 million euros to a group of companies and academics to research the scalability and cost effectiveness of producing collagen and elastin through precision fermentation, which is also, by the way, an opportunity that we already discussed for India. And India could, if the investments in India, both private and public, kind of match what is happening in different geographies, I feel like India has the potential, and we at GFI are confident that India has the potential to be a leader in this sector, particularly the input sector. this is also a massive opportunity to address the domestic and global market for these products and for these foods. And I think Indian startups would hugely benefit from a progressive policy framework. Just to take a look at what is happening globally as well in terms of policy wins. Israel, quite recently, US, Israel, and Singapore are three countries that have already approved cultivated meat products. Israel approved Aleph Farms cultivated beef. It is one of those countries where the Prime Minister, along with a lot of policy stakeholders, tried cultivated meat. US has approved two cultivated meat products, and a lot more are in the pipeline. A lot of precision fermentation and biomass fermentation inputs have been approved as well in the US, as well as Singapore. Singapore probably is the only geography where an approval is provided to a cultivated meat product, the Good Meats chicken that we spoke about earlier, the hybrid product, which is on the shelves. So you could go to the supermarket, buy that product, come home and cook it. Which is insane, because just I feel like a decade back, cultivated meat was something we were talking about as a technology alone, and nobody knew when it was actually going to hit the market, but it's here. South Korea has been making excellent strides as well. It recently amended its regulatory framework, and identified cultivated meat and inputs derived from fermentation as well within that framework. It also notified these regulatory free zones, where the regulatory compliances would be slightly reduced for research and development purposes, which means the R&D and iteration and the product development process would be much faster in those particular areas. And the Netherlands, as I was talking about, very promising environment. It has, in fact, the Netherlands, I think it notified a sort of there was a notification that's particularly spoke about cultivated meat tasting, and I think it was the first of its kind notification. So just to clarify, while the regulation of most of the European Union countries is from EFSA, which is the regulatory body, what the Netherlands did was to promote R&D for the companies. It allowed them to hold closed door tasting events so that they get feedback from the consumer and they could improve upon their products faster. Similarly, Japan is doing very promising things as well. United Kingdom, UK has already received its application, first application, more than one application now for cultivated meat product, as is Switzerland, as is Australia, and all of these countries, UK, Switzerland, Australia, South Korea, they are currently in the process of scrutinizing those cultivated meat applications, and hopefully we will see approval soon. So I just wanted to end by discussing all that we have spoken about today, I have spoken about today, and how that ties in ultimately for building a roadmap for smart protein in India. So much has been happening globally. A lot has started happening in India, and it's super promising how the kind of steps that ministries, particularly Ministry of Science and Technology, and DBT, etc., are taking. But if we talk about a roadmap for India to emerge as a leader in sustainable food supply, I believe these are the kind of steps that we would require, some of which have already been addressed by BioE3, and which is so promising, right? We feel that interministerial effort is going to be very important. Smart protein requires several ministries, be it Ministry of Food Processing Industry, Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Finance, when it comes to things like GST, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So many, several ministries, several departments, policy stakeholders, both at center and state, to come together to form a strategy for the growth of the sector. And BioE3 policy is a step in the right direction. Then, of course, we spoke about crop optimization and utilizing our indigenous crops, improving upon them, and utilizing them as inputs for the domestic and global plant-based alternative supply chain. Incentivizing domestic production by single window clearances, reduced rates of GST is also going to give those incentives to the farmers as well as companies to kind of shift more towards alternative protein sector. Development of skilled Talent pool is something that Bio-3 policy addresses as well, and we have already discussed. And of course, lastly, a progressive regulatory framework, which would be very essential because ultimately these products are meant to be consumed by a consumer. If there is no regulatory framework for their path to market, and if they don't reach the domestic consumer, then that would not be ideal. So that's also another thing that we really need to be looking at. I am thrilled that a lot is already happening across this entire roadmap that we put together. And I look forward to seeing a lot more that will happen in the future as well. That's all from me. Thank you very much, everyone. And I will hand it back to Nihar.
Thank you so much for that, Astha. That was very, very insightful. And I'm sure a lot of us learned a lot about just the Bio-3 policy as well as alternative proteins in general. So I know we're a little short on time. We have about 12 minutes remaining for this webinar, but we do have about 3 or 4 open questions in our Q&A section. So I think we'll just get started with that right away. One of the questions is, do we expect economic trade-offs with an increase in investment towards alternative proteins in reference to other sectors like the traditional meat and dairy industry?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Of course, we can't say a lot with certainty, but that is exactly what we are planning to get out of Bio-3 policy, and through a very supportive policy framework. So that is certainly the expectation, and that's certainly what we would like. We would want not just private investments, but also, for example, subsidies and public investments to kind of divert, and also, in addition to your conventional meat and dairy industry, also move towards alternative industry. So that's definitely what we would like.
All right. The next question that we have is there any advantage to increasing smart protein development for India as a major global exporter of many raw materials and such? Could this be a similar case of vaccine diplomacy that we saw during the pandemic?
That's such a good question, particularly the second part of this question. I think with food security becoming a major issue, it just might be, to answer your second question first. And on to the first question, there's a lot of advantage, and most of that advantage is one in creating jobs. Because if we are manufacturing domestically, we are creating a lot of jobs. At the same time, we are adding a lot to the revenue as well, because there are certain export targets that the policy, that the ministries have to meet, be it for, say, seafood, and there are different targets that MPDA has, and there are different targets that different ministries have. So the minute we start exporting heavily these inputs, be it precision fermentation inputs for culture media, or be it plant-based inputs derived from indigenous crops for global smart plant-based alternative supply chain, we add a lot to the revenue. So there's immense export potential as well. And of course, there's a lot of potential for these to be added to FTAs as well. And a lot needs to be discussed over there, because different geographies have different potentials. So while we have manufacturing capabilities, another geography, for example, say Netherlands, may have technological expertise, and there could be exchanges. So there are benefits of getting technology from them and providing them inputs, and there could be that sort of exchange as well.
All right. Now, moving on to one of the last questions we have for today. Someone is asking that it looks like a lot of investments and support are on the way towards research and development for smart proteins. What drawbacks currently exist that may halt or slow down smart protein development in India?
I think currently we require a lot of R&D, because it's a nascent industry and there's a lot of scope for development, particularly on taste, texture, nutrition, and quality of the products. So from crop optimization to utilizing agri-side streams to retrofitting of infrastructure available for vaccines, for precision fermentation inputs, R&D is happening on all of those fronts, as well as research is happening to identify where we can utilize existing opportunities, right? So when it comes to drawbacks that exist currently, then that may slow or halt it, is, I think, one very important drawback is lack of policy support. that is, of course, being fixed with BioE3. And we are really looking forward to seeing an implementation model and what happens to implement the policy on ground. And the second is also private investment. There isn't a lot of private investment. Like, for example, if I was to, I did have a slide on it, which I did not present, but if we are to compare in private investments between two climate solutions, for example, one is your alternative protein, and the other being energy, sorry, renewable energy. So renewable energy has approximately, I think, $1.8 trillion of investment. And alternative protein globally right now only has $11 billion of investment. So I think that's another major drawback. A lot more private investment needs to come into the sector for it to scale, and for it to develop, work on more on R&D as well as manufacturing capabilities, because ultimately good R&D and supplying it on scale is what is going to lead to getting these products to the market at affordable prices. I hope that answers your question.
If I may to follow that up with my own question regarding the answer to this one as well. Do you think one of the major drawbacks currently, and one of the reasons why we're having this as an introductory webinar itself and not a workshop, is that just a general awareness and knowledge about alternative proteins is something that's missing, especially in the Indian public. Even if we look at all levels of development, rural, urban, and whatnot. Do you think the major challenges exist not only just at the policy or regulatory level, but at the general knowledge available to the public?
Absolutely, 100%. This is a particular drawback when we look at consumer uptake of these products. A lot of consumers don't know, and we do a lot of consumer insights, by the way. All of them are available on GFI India's website, particularly for the Indian population. And we realize that a lot of consumers don't know about these products, don't know how to read the labels, identify. So there's a huge need to raise awareness of the category at large, of what smart protein alternative proteins are, what are they solutions to, how can you incorporate them into your diet. So from a consumer uptake perspective, as well as from getting relevant talent force to the sector perspective, right? We are having this webinar because you are the talent force, and you will be the future of smart protein. So it's very important that these conversations are had. We talk more about what the sector is, where the gaps are, so that talent could actually go into the right fields to fix those gaps. So absolutely agree with you, Nihar.
Right. So we are pretty short on time. So just two more questions that Karan had put in our Q&A section. The first one being, has there been any progress for the nomenclature of plant-based products like curd and butter by the FSSAI or any other regulatory body?
Um, Thank you for asking that question, Karan. This is primarily what I work on, and I'm happy to answer that there hasn't been any progress. And just to give you a brief overview, there are currently writ petitions which are pending before the Delhi High Court, so this matter is sub judice, and we might just get a decision on it soon from the Delhi High Court, but nothing has happened from FSSAI on the plant-based dairy alternative nomenclature and labeling. Currently, as per what FSSAI had earlier mentioned, and also mentioned in the FAQs to their vegan food regulations, by the way, is that these terms, the dairy terms, cannot be utilized by plant-based alternatives. And yeah, there is a stay from the Delhi High Court, but essentially none of the companies in the market are doing that at the moment.
Right. And just for our last question for today, again by Karan, in an accelerated ideal scenario, how can smart proteins succeed in the context of pervasiveness and mass consumption in India?
Interesting question. I think category awareness would be the biggest aspect that we have already discussed, because currently the problem is there is not awareness of the category. The second would be scaling on nutrition. So R&D is very important. So once we know that a lot or rather, let me put it this way: the major consumer base for these products also wants products that are nutritious, and they reach out to these products because they think they are nutritious, also ethical. So we kind of also need to scale on nutrition aspect of it, along with taste, texture, mouthfeel. So trying to make these products closer, and these are just plant-based products that we are talking about, by the way. Once we have precision fermentation inputs feeding into plant-based products. For example, Perfect Day got approved in India for their non-animal derived whey protein. And in US, they have tied up with Nestle, I believe, to have a couple of products that utilize that. And so the mouthfeel is much closer to the conventional dairy product, for example. So these are the aspects we need to be thinking on, and these are the aspects we need to fast track on to be able to get these products to the consumer.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Astha. I believe Dr. Rajni has a few words just before we conclude this webinar.
Hi, Astha. Am I audible?
Yes, Doctor, you are.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for presenting this webinar. I think it is very crucial. And, I also had the same question on consumer adoption. But I'm glad that Nihar already put it forward because sorry, I couldn't join from start. So in case I missed it, but I realized that across globally, whatever you have presented in different countries, as well as the roadmap, I was feeling that I was looking for awareness and adoption kind of, efforts under this program, or but I couldn't figure it out. So I was thinking because I had just recently moved from Singapore. So in Singapore, one of the restaurants I went, I had this mock meat because being vegetarian, it's very difficult for me to eat anything there. And they had just introduced this burger with the mock meat patty, and I was first a bit hesitant to try it, but then later on I just tried because most of our friends who are non-vegetarians, when they want to move to vegetarian lifestyle, it is easy for them, right? But for a vegetarian to try a mock meat is a bit of a, I would say, mind block, right? So I was thinking that something if you can share about, or later on maybe, about how we can together, work on awareness and consumer adoption, if we can get some insights on that, like how companies are looking forward to it, or what are the key drivers in your plans or roadmaps towards consumer adoption, would be really, really helpful. But this was awesome. I really, really enjoyed the talk, and I'm sure most of our students would have. I really want to thank Ashoka Chapter Protein Project for bringing this opportunity to all of us, where we could hear about the Bio E3 policy and all the amazing work the Food Institute is doing. So thank you so much, and we look forward to more and more collaborations with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Rajni, for having me and for your very pertinent questions as well. At GFI, we have sort of tried to answer this question about consumer adoption, and we have done studies to understand what is the roadblock to that. So I know we are at time, but I'm very happy to circulate those resources with Nihar, and maybe Nihar could take it forward from there and share it with the participants
Yes,
as
we
well.
can do
Definitely.
awareness campaigns based on those kind of insights.
Most
Excellent.
definitely.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you so
you
much for
everyone for
having me.
attending. Thank you to the Office of Sustainability for helping me arrange this. And thank you so much to Asta for coming here and educating us on alternative proteins as well as the BioE3 policy. And this will be us signing off, and we will see everyone on the next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.